One, take it away.
Hello and welcome to Glitch Point. All right, it's another week. Stuff happened.
The usual.
Yeah, the usual. Life is existence is still here. People are still around.
Mm-hmm.
Planet hasn't blown up. All good things. Um, so actually, I was just reading, and this is I think the last thing that I read was that, and this is not a big story at all, but it made me think. It says Overwatch and Diablo 2, not this year, basically. So
Diablo
not
2?
Oh, sorry.
I
Diablo 4.
was like, they doing a Diablo
Is
2,
it
but
is it 4? Yeah, sorry. It went I think
yeah.
I just wrote 2. Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, those games both dropped off the face of the. Well, less so Diablo, but I remember when Overwatch 2 got announced, like all they said was this one has a campaign and then zero things after that. Like it's
But
I forget that game exists.
here's the thing, like I mean it kind of begs the question, do we even need new games? Like what are we getting out of a new game anymore? Especially in these two games which are very stylized with their art, so they're very cartoony. At least in the direction that they've been moving. As I'm just talking about Diablo,
Yeah.
it's gotten a lot more cartoony.
Yeah.
I just don't know why they don't make subscriptions out of these and make it a subscription model. Just as they continually push out more content. If they want to have campaign, just add it to the game they already have, and maybe it's a clean slate type of situation. But
Yeah, Overwatch 2 was very I think that's probably why it dropped off is like the reception was very not well. Like we weren't pissed, but a lot of people were just like, "Why is there another one?" Because obviously you guys have this formula of multiplayer that's been working for a while. Why don't you just add in a campaign which especially with how Blizzard projects have been in the past, it would make sense.
yeah, and it's just I mean, like back in the day, it made a lot more sense because there was so much technology that was coming out that was radically changing the way that a game looked and felt and physics and all these new things that were coming. You had to rehaul it. But now
Yeah.
I just don't know what you're getting anymore. It just feels like, I mean, it's definitely going to probably look basically the same visually. The only thing I can think of is it's just you get stuck with certain traits that you can't get rid of because they're now inherent inside the game.
Yeah, and I mean maybe the other question is the generation jump. Like I wouldn't blame Blizzard if they didn't want to update the old game and then be like, well now you can't play it if you're on the old generation, kind of like how Destiny handled the transition to the Xbox One.
Yeah,
And then Diablo, I mean Diablo 3 came out 8 years ago, 9 years ago.
that's
So
true.
that one makes more sense, and I know there's gameplay up, but I haven't watched any of it, so I don't know like how drastically different. But that's another game that they like, talked about. But I'm like, what is I don't know what is Diablo 4 like? Is it that much different, or if it's just more of the same from 3? I know the guy from Gears of War left to go work on it.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure it's definitely as a marketing standpoint is, and because this is very much we've seen both sides of this coin with Destiny and how Destiny, we've even talked about it on the show. Destiny feels very heavy and hard to get into, and it's kind of the reason is because it's constantly adding more content and so maybe, and if there was another Destiny, they would probably get a lot of new players, but then it's do you are you happy with hardcore players and like people that are going to play every week.
Yeah,
So I don't know. I don't know if it's like how which side is better. I definitely think Diablo. I can understand maybe Overwatch, but because it deploys on so many consoles and different places that that hardware changes. So it might make a little bit more sense. But with Diablo, it takes forever for them to come to console, anyways. I mean, they do eventually, but
yeah, and I would say for I think for both of those games they could easily, well, not easily, but I could see them going the Halo Infinite route where now that we're at a new gen, they're like, all right, let's just like reset the slate. This is Halo Infinite, and then it's supposed to be getting updates for 10 years. Like, we're not going to get this significant new product. It'll just be like campaign DLC or something like that, which is the more games of service model. I could see Diablo being like, this is the next Diablo for a decade or so, or Overwatch being like, no, this is just going to be Overwatch for a very long time.
well, I think with games becoming too weighted down, it usually is because you have to everything's on top of itself, you
Yeah.
know. And you get this with a lot of MMO shooters, and also World of Warcraft. I would imagine is this way. Is it's, it's all adding into the same world. But yeah, as you said, you keep it separate, and you have very sectionized updates that are per subscription. I think it would be more receptive because it's not going to weigh down the actual game or the different sections of the game that coexist with it or existed before.
Yeah, and Halo's being weird, and I kind of didn't think about the pricing of that game until now. If they announced that the multiplayer was going to be free to play, but the campaign won't be, of course. So it's weird that like Halo Infinite is supposed to be getting story DLC for the next whatever amount of time, but then the multiplayer is free to play, so it'll probably have some sort of battle pass like all other free to play games have.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if that means that Halo Infinite is going to have a $60 campaign at launch, or if it's even going to merit that price. Like they could easily do it. It's Microsoft, so just charge everybody 60 like usual. But you're only getting a campaign at this point, where every other Halo has been campaign plus the multiplayer. It's weird.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that, it does work well because, the multiplayer is very subdivided in its own, play. I don't know how, Infinite's going to look because it's such a
Yeah,
different format that they definitely can play with the default game types. But, as we see it from this point, it's like, it's always been well sectioned up. And when they add stuff, it's not that big of a deal because it's usually, a new game type, or even if it's more content in, or, firefight or something, it's not. I think it's just Destiny that everything's on top of itself, So it's like, when they add like the whatever the light, up new DLC that comes
yeah,
out, it's like it's in the starting world. It's all over the place. So it just feels like it's getting more dense. Like the
yeah.
whole.
Which for existing players, it's awesome, and but yeah, for new ones, it's just getting harder and harder to get into it. And I know that Destiny is trying harder and harder to let people get into it, but it's just I feel that there's only so much they're going to be able to do, and at some point they're either going to have to give up or do some sort of reset. Like
Yeah.
I feel like their plan and their vision for Destiny of an ever living world, which I love that idea. It's just completely contradictory to having new people jump in. I don't know.
Well,
They
I
probably would
just
argue with me for it, but
I don't know. I think that you can separate it. I mean, I think if you were to create like if and maybe that's the way you need to do it is sample it out in its own ecosystem that only advanced players can get to so that it makes the beginning game or the other parts. But the problem is they mess with the way that you're actually playing the game, and that changes, and the way that the
yeah.
money is, and then you get all this new money. You don't as a new player, and I played way late, and I got into it. It just there was just too many things. And it was just like I didn't know what it was just so many things that you have to like understand and kind of get used to be able to be competitive or even know what you're doing. Um,
Yeah, and I think that I think because it's not an MMO, or they say it's
it
not
is.
an MMO, it is,
It's
but
not an
like it's
MMO.
not the
And
traditional MMO like World of Warcraft. Like that's, it's a lot different gameplay, and there are aspects of the MMO in there, but it's not like a straight up MMO. But they're getting to the point where the game has a, I don't know what the phrase is, but like to get into the game, you have to get into it just like an MMO. Like you have to just sit there and learn the game for a while. But the game doesn't look like that. Like if you were to just boot up World of Warcraft knowing nothing about it, yeah, there's so much you probably have to learn. But with Destiny, it's like, oh, it's just a first-person shooter, but it's really not.
yeah,
So I don't know if they just need to better tutorialize the game or figure out how to pace the game. It's just I don't know. But as a person who is like existing fan and keeps playing the game, there's no problems, which is
well, I
good.
think that there is, and with a lot of these MMOs, it's the point in which you really feel like competent as a character, and I just it takes a long time to get there.
Yeah.
I mean, even just the starting world, and I think that just by and I actually Diablo did a really good job of this. They added. It was pretty easy to get to the top level, and then once you capped out at the top level, then there were you would basically go to different levels of hell, right? And
Yeah.
like, and then that was the goal. It wasn't really about leveling anymore, which was how the old ones used to be. And I think that was problematic because now it's just about surviving or experiencing with the character that you built, experiencing the worlds that they're throwing at you. And I think that's such a better way of doing it. to where you quicken the process in which you feel like a badass. And you do, I don't know, Destiny just takes a long time. It felt like it was taking a long time to get to where I could even play with other people that have been playing for a long time, or felt like I was in outside even the temporary starting world, so I knew the bigger picture. Like I felt like it was almost like I was too tutorialized or too in the baby or the kiddie pool,
Yeah.
and I couldn't get out of the stupid kiddie pool. And I knew there was all this other stuff, but I wasn't. It took too long to grab me, like to pull me in. And I know it's the
Yeah.
raids, and I know it's like that's the thing. Like you go on these raids, and it's all about the weaponry and like these possible legendary drops or whatever that you can get that will up your character. But you just as a new player, I wasn't getting that right away. It wasn't
Yeah.
accessible. So I don't know.
Yeah, because I mean, Destiny has like the. It's not really well communicated, but as someone who's been there for a while, you start to realize that Destiny's kind of experience flow is there's a very distinct difference between the end game and the campaign. Of like when you're first starting the campaign, every character is not supposed to care about legendary drops really or leveling up. It's just getting through the story, because during that, by the time you're at the end of it, you're going to be prepared character wise to do the end game grinds of strikes, higher level missions, and getting legendary gear. But like there's always this phase every time my expansion comes out that me and my friends, this is the ugly phase. Like you don't care what you're wearing, you don't care about anything, you just want to get to the end of the story and learn what's going on. And then after that there's a secondary game, which is the end game of the game. But it's not really communicated well, especially when you're going back and forth from the tower where everybody else is. So when you jump in, you're in your ugly phase, but if you don't know that that's what's going on, you're just like, why is everybody else so much faster and better than I am? Then you're just sitting there like, I don't know what the fuck to do.
Yeah. Well, I even think that like the Crucible should be opened right when you start playing. I don't care.
It is.
Is it?
Yeah, you
You
can
can
jump
play
right
it.
into the Crucible. You might
How
have
do
to
you?
do one campaign mission, maybe two, but the second you're at the
Wait.
tower, yeah, you can go to the Crucible. And the Crucible is not like
Maybe I didn't play long enough.
levels don't matter. Like levels in the Crucible don't matter. So if you're a level 1 and someone has
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
level 1,000, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But yeah, that used to not be the case. You used to have to like unlock the Crucible, but now
Because I
I'm
couldn't
pretty sure
find
if
it.
you boot up a new character, it's just the whole game is open to you, which is a little overwhelming.
Is it?
Yeah.
Because I was in the, I mean, I didn't look too hard. Maybe I should take another look at it before I say too many things. But uh, yeah, I just felt like I was stuck in this, and there were missions and stuff, and there was definitely stuff going on, but I was just in the first world, and I didn't even have a bike yet. So
Uh, yeah. I need to start a new character. I'm
yeah,
curious
because
now. I need to like
I was like
reboot
waiting to even
character.
have a bike, and I played quite. I mean, I played more than 3 hours. I played about 5 hours, um, and it just turned me off that like I knew I was supposed to have a bike so I could travel around, or maybe I didn't know the inputs, but I was like, I don't even have a bike yet, and I'm like, God, this sucks.
Yeah, I feel like you have a default bike. I don't know.
Do
I'm
you?
gonna
Maybe I'm just an idiot. It's very possible
I'm
that I'm
gonna
just
boot
an
up a
idiot.
new character just to see what it feels like to play Destiny for the first time. It's gonna be hard because I do know what's going on, but like it also helped me like navigate what is and is not possible. But I know that they've done a lot of work to unlocking more of the game from the start, because that was a big complaint. But I know that they can't do every part of the game, and there also is like it. They probably unlock it, but they hide it from you because they don't want people to see 8 billion missions, and then they're like, "Well, I can't do any of these. I'm too low level." So they try not to show you the stuff that's just completely not able to do. I don't know. I
Yeah,
am curious though.
but it's like when we were talking about Zelda and going to like having the final boss accessible right from the start of the game, which is amazing. Um, for the last one what was the last one, Breath of the Wild.
Yeah,
So yeah, and it's just that kind of game design where everything's kind of open to you, and it's really just where it is. You kind of get a feel of they did. I mean that was a really good idea because you get a feel of the game, you get a feel of where you're going, and so you have a destination. You have this idea of an end goal. I personally, the other thing about Destiny was I don't even know who I was fighting. Um, I didn't
Yeah.
feel like I knew easily what the story was, and I know that this was a problem from the beginning, that the story was all, but it's like it's weird when you're shooting, and maybe I'm just I don't care about being the next Twitch shooter and being famous, so like I really want to know what's going on in a game.
Yeah, and it's just so I don't I don't know of the solution because I don't want them to do what they did. They used to do this thing and it was annoying for people into the game where I mean Destiny's been out for 7 years now. So every year has had a major campaign. Some years had like 3 because they used to do it a different way. But it used to be that every expansion to Destiny was like this one-off story. Like it had pretty much nothing to do with anything else. Maybe it mentioned other things happening, but it was always like, oh, this thing happened, go do it, and then it's like wrapped up completely. So like every single it felt like there was no overarching story to this game, and it was a little frustrating. And there was a shit ton of lore, and there still is. But now they've gotten to this point where they're starting to be able to tell continuous stories better. Um, but again, it's a problem of like if you're going to jump into a game that's been telling a story for 8 years, it's hard to catch someone up.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's not that hard. Maybe you just have to sacrifice the details. Maybe you should have a very overarching story that they give at the beginning if you want to listen to it. Just something like you can sum up all the Halos and what happened, even though it's confusing as hell when you watch it all together. Um, but you can sum it up in one YouTube video.
I mean, yeah, depending on how long the YouTube video is. Like, yeah, they could sacrifice some of the details in their.
I just want to know what the hell's going on, and like maybe I would get excited if I knew where I was going and what all this stuff was. Um, and it's funny that
Yeah, see, for the problem for me is like I don't know what campaign they start you off on because there was like there's Destiny 2's campaign, which is the Red War, and then there's Forsake. Like, there's all of these stories that have been told that are in big chunks. I don't know where they start you off anymore because some of
yeah.
them they've told that are legacy. So it's like, oh, you can't. I don't think you can play Forsaken anymore because it's so old, and they just took it out of the game to reduce file size and so that they could focus on other things. I have fucking no idea.
Yeah. Well, this is I mean, I don't know. It's a very big problem, obviously with trying to keep an ongoing lore that keeps adding to itself. And this is kind of where Halo, had its issues as well.
Yeah, I mean every
Bungie's.
franchise gets to this point, and it's kind of tough. Like Star Wars is a good example of similar to Destiny, where every movie has its own little story that's wrapped up, but then there's 3 trilogies that each trilogy has its own story that is overarching between 3 movies. And then if you look at it, there's an overarching story between all 9 movies. And Destiny is that way. There is a story that's been getting told since Destiny 1. Granted, it's very complicated. And then there's other ones that have been told within just Destiny 1 or just this expansion, and then they all do tie in. Like, it's a big universe.
Yeah, but all this for Star Wars, and this is maybe what they should do, is they were all written before they were shot. I mean, like the prequels were obviously written before, um, the original 3 came out. So I mean, it still has some sort of coherency along the line because there's George Lucas had some sort of idea of
That's true.
how he wanted the entire. This is happens in television a lot, where I think that, and I think that Bungie, I feel like Bungie does this. They just kind of write it. They add to the story.
Yeah, and
So
the other issue they've had is just the development things they've done, like the amount of times they've reset the game. Like Destiny 1 had a story, then they rewrote the story into a new one, and then Destiny 2 was the same way. And then Destiny 1 had this entire story that was going in one direction, and because people complained about it, they were like, well, let's go in a different direction. And then eventually people were like, well, what the hell happened in the first fucking game? I don't understand. And then they're like, well, let's start wrapping it back. Like, yeah, Destiny just kept going off in these weird directions, and every expansion was a new branch, and it just didn't coexist. And then they're finally, the past year or two, have been them being like, okay, let's just actually have a cohesive story and plan out years in advance. And that was something they did with when they announced the Beyond Light. This was the
oh,
first
okay.
time they were ever like, by the way, here's the names of the next 3 expansions, which is the next 3 years of Destiny, which we had never seen
But it's a
before.
little late now. I mean, that's great and all, but
That's what I'm
you
saying.
kind of have to do, and you can't really clean slate, like, and that's where the two, and the three comes. But I don't. The problem with Destiny is does the original Destiny story plots are part of this world?
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can't even. I mean, you'd have to, but I would think, well, I suppose, with games like Overwatch or Diablo, I mean, you kind of can rewrite the story because I mean, you can make a different lead or um, different. I mean, you would want to keep the same characters in Overwatch, but and there's not much of a story in Overwatch, anyways.
Yeah, and Destiny. I mean, Destiny has so much more mystery in their story than I think a lot of other games have. I mean, Halo had some mystery with like who were the Forerunners and like, but that was always in the past. But since day one, Destiny took this approach of like, we're gonna tell you 10% of what the fuck's going on, and eventually you'll get to 100%. It's very strange. So like, I can't really tell you what's going on because there's a lot of parts of the campaign where I'm like, I don't know what's going on because I'm still waiting for them to tell that part of the story. Like the darkness, no one really knows what that is. But
Yeah.
that's the main enemy in the game. And then the travelers still don't know what the fuck it really is. It's been
Yeah.
7 years. But like you see the next 3 years and like these are the stories that we're probably going to start telling. You're like, oh,
Yeah,
you're
but
you're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel for what the fuck they've been telling us for 7 years, and it's just like, man, it's not a good time for people.
do they know what the hell they are? I mean,
It feels like they know more than they used to.
this is like, okay, this is like, I remember watching Lost when Lost came
Oh
out
god.
on TV,
Yeah.
and it was just like they were just fucking making the shit up every week, and like they were creating more open-ended storylines than they were closing. And then, so there would just be and a lot of them they never even got to. There was the stupid numbers or something. I remember the numbers. What are the stupid numbers? And they never even explained what the numbers were. They just kind of abandoned it.
Yeah, no, there
And
was also like there was one episode where like a polar bear was on the island and never got explained. Absolutely never got explained.
and that's the kind of writing, and like it's fun, right? It's a lot of fun to watch when you're watching it, but then you get to a point where you're like, you know what? They don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah, I think that was the second expansion of Destiny 2 was the moment everyone was like, "You guys, what the fuck are you doing?" And then they were like, "You're right. Let's take it a step back." Cuz Destiny 1 was just a shit show of a lot of the people who were writers at Bungie wrote a story, it was canned, and then a lot of people outside of the writers group was just piecing together a story with the assets they had. So it was not really cohesive in any way,
Oh,
and
okay.
they've been recovering for a long time, and now yeah, like we know where the story is heading to, not getting spoiled and stuff, but it's it feels like they know what they're doing right now, and I'm hoping it's going to consist and keep going with that.
Yeah, well, it needs to. I mean, I really do think that the viewers and the consumers of media are a lot smarter than the writers think. I mean, and we're just getting more apt to good stories and what it means to have a good story and what it means to be engaged. And I mean, just look at television and games from like 10 years, 15 years ago. We're just a lot more attuned to bullshit. um, and I get this actually all the time with high action films and just the stuff they throw at you, especially sci-fi films. And like, I really actually hate the Star Trek films.
Oof. The
I'm a
one with
huge.
JJ or all of them?
Yeah, no, just the newer ones.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, but because they don't adhere to their own rules, and they do a lot of stuff that's Michael Bay-ish and like, just. I mean, I know that's not him, but
Yeah.
um, I just use him as an example because it's more about the visual effect than the actually making sense.
Yeah, definitely.
And it bugs me. And I just think that a lot of times writers for all types of media, they just don't consider their audience to be that smart. And we are smart,
Yeah, and I think when you brought up loss, I feel like a big problem with television that I've seen, other than sitcoms are like, they're just whatever, they can get away with
Yeah.
it. But I feel like the writers, they have an idea, they have a story to tell, and they're like, hey, we want to make this show. And it goes really well, and then they realize, like, the network's like, this show's awesome. You need to have 5 more seasons, and they're just like, oh. We were only like, you don't write a show planning on having 5 or 10 seasons. You write it so you can tell it if it only has 2 or 3. And then he gets to this point where it's like, well, you have to keep writing so the show keeps going. And then you start making a bubble and you're like, all right, let's make it bigger. And then it's like, oh, no one likes it anymore. Let's cancel it. And then Lost is like, oh shit, we got to close it again. Um,
Yeah,
and
that was the point when they left the island and then had to get back to the island.
yeah, like I feel with Lost, it's like, okay, we like they knew the start, middle, and end, and then they hit the middle, and then they're like, no, 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 we need a lot more episodes of Lost, and like, okay, we'll branch out so we can last longer, and then after all, like, no, 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 shut it down. They're like, ah, fuck, we're too big now, and they couldn't tell all the stories.
Oh, God, Lost. I remember that because I think that was supposed to be the real end was when they left the island.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And then it was like, no, 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 they never left the island.
Yeah, they're all dead or whatever.
Yeah.
A good show, but yeah, it was. Good lord.
um, but yeah, no, it's just it honestly, I think that, and if any writers listen to our show, it's like what I see it as is when you create a world, and I don't care what the hell it is, you could have no gravity, you can have, but if you create the rules, you have to adhere by your own rules that you create for that world.
Yeah,
And that's what it happens all the time, where people just defy their own rules that they created, and it's like,
yeah, and I mean, especially when you make an aspect of the universe a big mystery, and then because it's a mystery and it's not well defined, it start like the Force.
yeah,
It wasn't defined, and now it's like, well, can we Force heal? Fucking apparently, and like, it just doesn't make sense. And Destiny's, they've done a pretty good job at managing stuff like that. And I think it's because they've kept certain things so vague and slashed like in the background. Like the darkness they haven't defined, but they haven't abused that it's unknowledgeable. But they
yeah.
just kept it in the darkness, lol. But it's
Well,
I don't know.
I feel like the Force is a great example. It is like the dumpster for fucking bad story plot. It's
Yeah,
it gets you out of
absolutely.
anything. The Force gets you out of any, like the one where they are stuck in a quicksand and there's like
Yep.
tunnels underneath them. It's like, oh no, that's right. They didn't even use the Force there. That was an opportunity where they should have used the Force and they didn't.
Yeah.
They obviously, there's all these tunnels and all of them happen to hit a tunnel because it's all random, and
Yep.
and it's like they didn't even use the Force there. But there, a lot of them, like where Obi-Wan, or sorry, Luke projects himself
Yep.
into into that tunnel with the red, in that planet with the red sand.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that,
I mean,
it's like, oh well, how do we explain? How are we going to get out of this one? Oh, the Force. We'll just.
yeah, that was the problem with the new trilogy was the Force just being fucking
Force, man.
abused, and it did. It felt like they wrote all these like this story. Well, they threw out story for episode 8, but they had a story with scenes that they wanted to have, and then they're like, well, that doesn't make sense. How would Luke be there and there? Oh, fuck, Force, dude. Like,
Just throw it in the Force dumpster. We got this.
yeah, it's just like a button. Anytime they hit a block, they're like, oh, press the Force button.
Oh, God.
And it was frustrating because that didn't ever. I can't think of moments in the original trilogy that were just so. Oh, the Force. There were a couple, like, how did Leia know that Luke was in suffering and falling out of Cloud City? But,
that makes sense because they're connected.
Like that sort of stuff made sense, but it never got that far fetched. And that's what I love about The Mandalorian and some of the new Star Wars stuff we're starting to see is they're going back to those basics of the Force does not just give you a scapegoat.
Well, and the other one is just and if we're just gonna have a Star Wars bashing episode,
Let's
then I'm not
bash
ready.
that shit, dude.
Because the other one that bugged the shit out of me was when they got caught in that party. Oh no, and the what the hell's that guy's name? The guy that betrayed Luke.
That betrayed Luke.
The black guy.
There's a black guy who betrayed.
Oh no,
Luke. Lando.
Yeah, Lando.
Yeah.
So when Lando's in that, like, and he just randomly, they're on. You know how many freaking planets there are? And they're at this party or something, this festival on a planet. Remember that when they find Lando on? It's when he does the beginning of his cameo.
So what episode are we talking about here?
God, they all mashed together.
Because there's Lando in Cloud City in episode 5 where he does betray them, but Are you
No,
talking of a different one?
well, I'm talking about the new series.
Yeah, yeah. Where Lando's just randomly on that fuck. Yeah, yeah,
Just
yeah.
randomly on that planet, and it's like, dude, what the hell? Yeah, I think that's what are we
That's
even
episode
at?
9. That is
It's episode
episode 9.
9.
Yeah, that made
Okay.
fucking no. Well, like it's really tough because with episode 7 they set up a story, and then episode 8 threw the whole fucking thing out and did its own thing, and then episode 9 was this like, how do we salvage this shit? So yeah, episode 9's full of shit that's just like, oh, that's great, that's really lucky, or oh, let's use the force here.
Yeah.
Which, like, again, I think they wrapped it up the best they could because episode 8 really did nothing for that fucking franchise. But yeah, that was one of the worst ones where Lando's just there
Yeah.
on some random ass planet, which I don't even fucking remember why they're on that planet.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it just makes the entire. It's like when I used to watch Star Trek, and they did it really well, but all the old '90s sci-fi shows like Stargate, Star Trek, or whatever,
Oh, I love
it's like
Stargate.
they always land on these planets, and like the planets are like 6 blocks. Every planet is like
Yeah.
6 blocks, and that's it. Like
Yeah.
and
Uh,
it's just like, well, isn't there like this isn't it doesn't it's not relative to the size, but and that's what I'm saying. I think that people are a lot smarter, and that's in the '90s where we were kind of okay to be duped like that, and it was good. But I feel like people today need more realistic sets and more,
yeah,
you
and
know.
I think like with like you mentioned with Stargate and Star Trek, they're in that boat of like the point of it was just to keep going. Like there was no big, no prevalent overarching goal. I mean, yeah, with Enterprise or with Next Generation, it's like, oh, we're just exploring.
Yeah,
So it's like, yeah, a new place every week makes sense because you can just do that forever. But I think that's what I'm really liking about some of these new Disney shows like WandaVision and The Mandalorian. Even though they've announced a fuckload of them, it seems like they're taking the approach of let's not make a show that we can try to see if it sticks, and if it sticks, just tell it till it dies.
yeah.
But they're like, no, we have a story, we're gonna tell it, and then when it's over, it's over. Because like no one's like, where's season 2 of WandaVision? It's just like, oh no, we're just gonna get like this bite-sized story, and it's gonna live up to whatever. And then Mandalorian, they had 2 great seasons, and then they're like, well, we're not gonna have one next year. We're gonna do something else. We will probably come back to it in 2022.
No,
And that feels great.
yeah, that's great. I do like, and there's just so many stories to be told within those worlds that I'm glad that they're doing that. And honestly, that's where I think that a lot of the games come in, and especially in Star Wars and different. Even I haven't played many Star Trek games. Actually, I don't think I've played any Star Trek games.
There have not
Um,
been many.
but they're the ones that used to be the place where you get these subplots that were off the main storyline. But now with like Rogue and all these other movies that are trying to tell sub stories, it's really cool. And like, I mean, I know it's been around for a little while. I mean, there's definitely been, what was the Star Wars animated series?
Oh, the Clone Wars.
Yeah, the Clone
Yeah.
Wars. So I mean, they've been doing it a while, but it is nice, to kind of flesh those worlds out rather than try to continue on with the same formula,
Yeah,
and just give short shorts.
and I think that's just something that I've noticed in media for a while. Is like no one likes things to end, and I'm really enjoying when things end. Like I hate this endless thing. Like when did you watch Mando season 2?
I did not. No, I haven't
Okay.
actually. I'm waiting on it.
Okay, well, I mean, I was surprised that what they did in season 2 and how they ended that. It felt like they were like, "Yep, we're done." And I was like, "That's awesome," because like The Mandalorian is this huge success. Like they could have just kept publishing episode after episode and people would just stick around like The Walking Dead. But they were like, "Nope, it's over." And I'm great cuz The Walking Dead just never fucking ended. And it got
What
worse and
it
worse
did.
and worse. And it's just like, God,
Is this still going?
I don't know, probably. People keep coming
Yeah.
back or some shit. But it's nice because I imagine as a writer it must be nice to know like you have this many episodes to tell your story, so get the pacing done, get like all of like wrap it up in a nice thing, and it feels like so far Mando and WandaVision have felt like the best shows in terms of pacing and storytelling that they've had that I've seen in a long time. And it's because they know exactly how long they have you.
Well, I think it's also like, with a lot of those shows, especially for like The Walking Dead, and also I think Dexter's another great example of it, where it's a really good show, but if you let it run for too long, the formula starts to become apparent. Like you
Yes.
start to understand exactly how they're writing the show, and it does, and like they you have the same crescendos season after season, and they're basically the same thing, but yet nothing really resolves. And if you end at the same crescendo that you had the last season, and you keep ending at the same place, it's like, well, I've already been here.
Yeah,
Why
that's
am
how
I
I
here
felt
again?
with the Flash TV show.
Yeah,
I enjoyed
yeah.
it, but like, yeah, after 2 seasons, you're like, so who's the next speedster that's gonna fuck around for a season and die? Like, it just,
But I think like the
ugh.
'90s shows could get away with that because we didn't have anything else, and TV wasn't as developed. And like even watching it now is just like people loved the equation, that it was like this, because it just was predictable. And but I just think with new shows it just doesn't work because they're too dense, or there's too much going on.
Yeah, and I
Um,
mean, I think it's the same thing with games. Like in the 90s, the story didn't seem to matter as much, but some games pioneered and pushed forward and were like, but what if it was like this? And then everyone's like, oh, wait, that's awesome. And now we get games like The Last of Us, who, like, the point of the game is to tell a story. And
yeah,
that's not how any game was really in the 90s.
yeah, no, not really. Well,
We're just,
adventure
I don't know, we're just getting more, not complex, but more sophisticated, I
or
guess.
Zelda games, you could say the Zelda games tell a story maybe ish.
Yeah, sure. Story
Sure.
of the fucking dude in a tree.
Yeah.
His whole
But
fucking family.
yeah, it. I don't know. I think it's good. I think um, it's good that things are changing. That they're kind of recognizing their customers or their viewers. And I just think games are a little bit behind on that. And Destiny is as we talked about, that's a good example. I think it's just respecting how the psyche of the human mind has changed, and like how much can we take of the same types of storylines, of the same stuff, and like what does it mean to get new players in?
Yeah,
Uh,
and I mean, I think something I was enjoying Beyond Light, but it did the same thing they always do of like, and it's hard. I don't know what I would do differently if it's always like, oh, here's a new enemy. I don't know where they came from, but you have to go kill them. And
but
I don't know how much story they put in the raids now. I haven't raided in a long time, but it is starting to get a little old.
yeah,
And then like every expansion, they like just a teensy bit tease you with that overarching story that you really want to know about. But I'm like, can we just talk about that?
you know what? Isn't it? I mean, like, couldn't we flip this on its head, where instead of solidifying the mechanics and then adding ways to use those mechanics and environments to use those, and why don't we solidify the world and then change the mechanics? And I know that sounds fucked up because
Well,
everyone's like, no, you can't
what
change the mechanics.
define like world versus mechanics? Like the
So,
story or the
yeah, I mean,
sandbox?
let's say you still have the same experience, but I don't know if you added like space travel to Destiny or something. You're adding mechanics to it, but then it's only within this one world that shares in the story or the lore of the game. So it explores the lore that they've already kind of created to better explain it, but then it adds different mechanics. It's a different type of game. So instead of, you're exploring the world with different games rather than trying to keep the same game or keep the same equation, keep your
Ah,
customers happy, and then changing the world around it, and then like
yeah,
adding to the world around it. You say, so like, let's say it's like if you were to create a 2D game inside of Destiny,
yeah.
and like that's a way for you to re-experience the story or like get more of the story. So like, I mean, that's a very extreme example, but try to get people engaged in new experiences so they can,
I
I
mean,
don't know.
yeah, that's something I've always wanted and I liked. Like, that's what made Star Wars games so great. And hopefully, going forward, now that EA doesn't have exclusive rights to make the games, they get back to that. Because it was like, there wasn't Star Wars the game that was just the same developer, not necessarily the same developers, but like just the same type of game and story, just keep evolving. It was
Well,
like,
there's Lego Star Wars,
oh yeah,
and
Lego
like,
Star Wars was that. But then there's all these other Star Wars games that was like, oh, this one is an RPG, this one's a first-person shooter, this was a third-person action, this is a racer, and it like kept building out the story of Star Wars and the canon of it, but in different realms. And that's something I always wanted Halo to do, but they've only ever made Halo Wars, which was a breath of fresh air. But
yeah,
like, there's so much you could do with the Halo universe that's not just a corridor type shooter. And I'm hoping Infinite kind of leads us to this point of maybe we don't always have the same Master Chief type story. What if we have a smaller scale story?
What if there's sports inside of, I mean, they've kind of done this. Yes, there's grift ball, but that's not a real sport. But like, what if there was like a sport league, like, and like, and there was like this, they create within the game, and it's like this idea of just having, competitions and leagues and like, I don't know. I feel like there can be more games inside games.
Yeah, I think that was something that Halo 4 did that was so brushed under the rug because it didn't really matter
Well,
and
they
they
had
didn't expand
racing too.
upon it. Yeah, racing. People have wanted them to officially put racing in the game and actually have matchmaking, and I think that would be fucking awesome.
Yeah,
Um, Fingers crossed. But something they did with Halo 4 was they gave the multiplayer some narrative because until that point it was just like, it's multiplayer, whatever. But then in 4 they were like, no, this is the war games and this is like what Spartans
yeah,
do. They train on the Infinity, and I wanted them to build on that and see
that
like
was cool.
what,
I do remember that.
but they didn't. I don't know, and it's not really needed, but it was a nice touch.
Well, and it also played with all the material that they were putting out with the Spartan movie short things
Oh
for the
yeah.
Spartan soldiers, and like so, and you got a real feel for there what these soldiers, and then um, I don't know, it just and we got ODST, so it was just so that like it was getting away from Master Chief and like there is an actual army and yeah, it would have been really cool. Um, it feels more like a book, right? Like
Yeah.
and that's kind of how books play is they, you have these experiences with it. You can have them within the world. Um, I don't know.
Yeah, see, like we experimented with episodic games in the industry for a while, but I think that we should revisit them.
But
I
they were
really
always like for
do.
shows and
Exactly,
they
like
were
everyone
terrible.
was a Telltale fucking game, and like I mean there are others, but they're
No, there
very
was
similar.
what was it? Alan Wake was another one.
It wasn't full. No, that wasn't episodic.
Yes, it was, wasn't it?
No, it took place
It
as
was
a
supposed
TV
to be.
show,
It was
but it
supposed to
wasn't
be.
episode. Oh, you're thinking of Quantum Break?
No, Alan Wake.
Well, okay,
Quantum
well,
Break, Alan Wake.
Alan Wake was a like yeah, it was a TV show, but it wasn't released in chronological. Like it wasn't. It was a full package. You bought the game and you had the whole thing.
No, I know, but they were supposed to add more episodes, weren't they?
Oh, well,
And they
maybe. I mean,
never
they
did.
added
I mean, there's
one, but
there's 6 episodes, and then one special. It looks like that's what the internet says. But it was
yeah.
supposed to be an ongoing thing for Alan Wake.
And then Quantum Break tried again, but it was like here's an entire game and an entire TV show, and then after you beat a mission, you get a TV episode, and it's like that's a 30-minute cutscene, dude. No one really. That's the pacing doesn't feel right, and it didn't really do well. But I don't. And then I think Hitman, but that didn't. I also didn't do well. But that was more of like here is a one-off mission thing that we're just gonna release in part. It felt like they were releasing a game in parts, but I
Yeah,
think that we could maybe take a step back and like what if there was a first person shooter where like the game was fully done but we release it every week and you buy the $60 game, it's like okay, come back on Friday for the next big campaign mission and you just
yeah,
like
but
play it.
has it always been Codename 47
Yeah,
in all the
I
games?
think so. I'm pretty
So
sure.
that's another thing. Like, do we even like has any of the hitmen like talked about the agency or the is it
I'm be honest, never played a Hitman game in my life. I
really?
don't
I
fucking
I don't know.
know.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like that. That's another series where there's probably an entire governmental. I haven't played. I mean, I played them like the first couple, so I don't think there was very much story in those. Um, I'm sure there is. There has to be.
Yeah, definitely. I
I'm sure
assume
they
not.
talk about it, but I mean, and there was a movie too.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
which
haven't
wasn't
seen it.
very good.
Yeah, I've heard. But I
So
wonder if Halo's gonna go into an episodic route with Infinite and like how they're gonna handle that. Cause like I think this is something that we saw like when episodic games died was when binge watching TVs were on the rise and it was like, oh, Netflix released the show, it's the whole thing, watched it in a day, and everyone's like, this is awesome. And now Disney's like, what if we didn't do that and we go back to this weekly thing? And people, I don't know, I mean, I'm sure there's people who wish they could watch the whole thing in one sitting, but people are loving it. Like it's a buzz every single week. And I think Disney's taking this approach of if they have enough shows that are these bite-sized stories so that they don't have to have one show with 18 seasons, they can have a new big episode every week of the year of some new show, and it just cycles out. Like right now it's WandaVision, the next one will be maybe some other Star Wars show, or I guess the next one will be the Falcon and
Yeah.
the Winter Soldier. So, and I love that. It's like, oh yeah, every week there's some cool new episode of this cool new thing happening.
No, I think that's
Games,
great.
I feel they could do that. I just don't know if ever anyone's gonna try to do it again.
It just takes. I mean, well, I don't know. I mean, yeah, it takes a long time to make shows too. So
Yeah, you couldn't, and I think that's been the problem of developers have been like, especially with the Telltale games, that they tried to quicken their turnarounds so that they can have games that they release one, make the next one, and release it, where they should maybe just do what a TV show kind of would do of like make a ton up front so that you have 5 weeks to kind of put another one down and make the next ones, or
yeah,
just
but
release the
I
package.
mean, and the problem with the Telltale, I mean, the thing that dragged them down and was also just the fact that they had their own engine, and so they were all, that's the thing. It's like with games, your technical debt, especially if you're doing that, if anything needs to change or anything goes wrong with the engine with the new episode that you're trying to do, and whoo, you know.
Yeah,
And you can't fix it because you're constantly trying, and and that's what Telltale did. They had to switch over, right? Unity engine. They switched over to the Unity.
I want to say yeah.
Was it either Unity or Unreal? But I mean that and that was like near their downfall. Um, but it's just hard, man. It's like that's really difficult to say because you just never with tech, you just never know what the hell's going to happen.
Yeah.
You never know what you could get a bug that takes a week to fix.
Yeah, but I'm saying like just get it to like get not Halo Infinite, but like for example, if they just made Halo Infinite, made the whole campaign, and then they're like, all right, release it on November whatever, and you could play the whole thing. What if instead you just get to that point of it's all done and you just say release one part every week?
I see what you're saying. Actually, I see what you're
Which
saying now.
yeah, I don't
didn't
know if Halo
understand.
is the game that I'd want to do that with, but I feel like some games could really be
I would
cool with
actually really
that.
like that. This comes into the conversation of games are too long too, and then you
Yeah.
could also make them a lot longer. And I think that that would be respectful to the psyches of the user or the players, because I think that they're not taking into account that people can't play a game for
Yeah,
how
and I
many
mean
hours
maybe that's
straight.
why I'm like really wanting this to happen is because now I'm realizing that I just don't have a lot of time to play games, and it would be nice if it was just like, oh, here's an hour of gameplay every week. And I mean, Destiny does this in a sense that there's the weekly reset, and other MMOs do this where it's like come back every week, and now you can redo your weekly challenges and your strikes
But
and
that's just
raids.
adding more to the game. It's not piecemealing it out. You're talking about
Yeah, yeah,
piecemealing out the
yeah. I'm saying piecemealing it
campaign.
out.
But I think that I have to say, like, I have not played a big game since Last of Us 2. I have been. It just kind of hurt me,
Me
man.
either.
I it took so much for me to finish that game that I was burnt out. I was like, I just felt like I just want to play, and I've just been playing small little games since then, like phone games and like just anything that's really small and like bite size. Because it took too much out of me to try to finish that game.
I know, and that game was it did it because I still haven't played Cyberpunk more than an hour, and that game I just look at it, I'm like, oh, there's just so much time to invest in it, and yeah, Last of Us really kills you because like yeah, I mean it was so good and like the story was great, and you're just like I want to know what happens, but A, you're getting like emotionally beat down the whole fucking time. B, like yeah, if you're it can be challenging at times and it's like a slower paced game. Yeah, it did take a lot of energy to beat that game.
Yeah, yeah. It's
I'm surprised I had it in me, but yeah, I'm still not. I guess I played Doom, but that was just a DLC, so yeah, I haven't played a big game since.
But if it was piecemealed out, that would be pretty cool. But then what happens if you miss a week? I guess that
Well, it could just build up like a streaming service. Like if I miss a WandaVision week, I just watch the next one the next week.
yeah.
Which again, I the solution would be buy a new game, set aside an hour a day and play it, and then stop playing it. And I could totally do that. But I just won't.
Yeah, no,
It's like it's just a completely different like mental state. If it's like, oh,
well,
I only have an hour to do rather than well, I have 8 hours of this game left. I could like chip away at it. Chipping away at something and then completing parts of it are completely different levels of engagement.
well, and also because it's self-contained, so it's
Yeah.
it's promised you exactly an amount of time. The thing with you have no idea what the next mission's going to, how long the next mission's going to take.
Yeah.
It could be a very involved mission. You get into it and you're like, shit, like I was supposed to only be playing this for an hour. Now I'm stuck, playing it for 2 hours. Um, and also, I think that there's, the other thing that I just don't like with both television and games is just this constant need to try to addict me to it. I don't want to be addicted to the
Ugh,
damn
I
to
know.
media
Holy
anymore.
shit.
Like I don't want to crave the next episode. I don't want to like have to finish or like keep playing the game. And I think that would solve it, because it would just be enough, where it's kind of nice to be able to put the I can't binge anymore, but put the thing
Yeah.
down and just go do something else, have a
Well,
life.
something that, yeah, I think that's why, I mean, I can binge, but when I think of the things I can and can't binge anymore, I think that's the answer of like, I can't binge games anymore. I can't sit there and play a game for 8 hours like I used to. But I can sit through and watch 3 movies back to back because it's like, oh, I watched movie, completed movie. And then I'm like, oh, now I'm going to take like 5 minutes and I'll just start the next one. And it's like these segments that I can take out. And I'm going to say this and kind of not agree with it, but I kind of want missions to come back. But Last of Us, I think that's what was so daunting is there wasn't a very distinct
You
period of
don't want
time
missions.
where it was like, oh, this mission has ended, the next one's about to begin. There were
I
some
get
points in that campaign, but it just felt like I didn't know when the mission was over. I didn't know like how much longer that level had to take, so I don't know if I want to stop now and then come back. But it was nice before. It was like very clear. Oh, this is the next mission, like in
Yeah, I guess
Halo.
you'd have to do it that way to make it super clean, but you could just have it. I don't know how you do
I
it,
think there's a
like
middle ground. I agree. There's a middle ground to making Last of Us feel more segmented than it did. But also, I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't want it to feel segmented. Like God of War, no cameras, cuts, everything. They want that game to just be this smooth experience all the way through, and I respect that. But kind of
you
want the
can still
bite
you can still
size.
retain that by not allowing the NPC to be there or something until the next week, or so you can continue. It would change the way games are designed. You would have to design to this idea. Like
Oh
you would
yeah, no,
definitely
no,
you would
yeah,
have to like make it so that the whatever you could do it like an MMO, right, where you have a constant engagement that you can go through. Like you can level up to a certain level, and there's still stuff to do that was already there that you can go do if you want to do that throughout the week. But then come the next episode, something shows up.
yeah, and yeah, I think that's why Hitman's episodic approach wasn't very well received. Was it did feel like the game was released in parts, and if you don't make the game with episodes in mind from the get go, it will feel that way.
Yeah.
But that's something else I forgot Destiny does, which is they do release content out in parts sometimes. But I feel like they could expand upon this a little bit better, which is when the new expansion comes out, they don't just say, here's the expansion, here's everything, go. They were like, okay, here's the expansion. You have 3 weeks to get ready because the raid drops 3 weeks later, which is
Ooh,
really
that's
cool. And it's always like a world event. So like in Destiny, it's like new expansion, and then 3 months later, it's like, or 3 weeks later, the game's like, hey, the raid is available, and they tell you this little cutscene or whatever. And then once the first players beat it in the world changes, and they're like, hey, you guys overcame the raid or whatever, even though I didn't fucking do anything. But
okay.
it's neat.
Yeah, and I think that as you said before, where it's kind of the campaign drops and you have to get through the campaign to finally get to the raiding and the finding of the weapons when new DLC comes out, you could separate those in time, which is what I think you're saying, and
Yeah.
then I think that would at least wouldn't give you that because you're probably tired, like after you've played the campaign, you're like, okay, that's enough. And then but now the raids are there, and you're like, I kind of need to play the raids because your friends are going to go play them, and then it's like, ugh, you know.
Yeah.
And I know that's what you're doing, but like,
It just
I
goes
don't know.
back to Destiny's a big fucking chore. And I don't
Well,
know how
that's
else to
probably
put
why
it.
it feels like a chore is because it's a constant grind, It's like constantly you need to stay on top of it. But if it's funny, it's like Ready Player One, the movie. I
Yeah.
don't think they did this in the book. I can't remember, but in the movie, the main guy, whatever that Percival or whatever the hell his name
Parzival,
is,
yeah.
yeah, he declares after he declares that they're going to take days off.
Yeah.
And it's kind of that. It's kind of like that idea of you know allowing your consumer to rest a little bit so that they can contain still enjoy the material that you're putting out.
Yeah, and then I it Destiny has those systems, and like, yeah, it feels like there's only so much you can do in a week, so they're like, well, once you do all those things, like, move on, and the hardcore people will do it all three characters, which will probably take the whole week. But it's at this point where it's like, yeah, I could play Destiny, but the only way to get everything done in that week is that to be the only game I play.
Yeah.
And there's just so many damn games out now that no game can and should, in my opinion, be trying to be your only game.
Well, I mean, it even goes to like what we are trying to do. And I know in the beginning of this, when we started this podcast, we were trying to definitely play games and stay on top of it. And no
Yeah,
way, man. It's like,
it's so hard.
it just, if you were to take, and I don't even know how you would rate this, and I think we actually talked about this in an episode once, but if you were to take the amount of data that existed 10 years ago, like the amount of data that you consumed in a week, an average person consumed in a week to stay current, and the amount of data that we have to consume now to stay current, it would have to be exponentially
Oh,
bigger.
it is
And
100%.
it's just it's getting to the point where you really have to choose, do I want to be a consumer or a creator? You
It
can't be
does feel
both.
like that. Yeah.
I'm either going to sit back and, eat Cheetos my entire life or actually do something with it. You know, no offense to people that like Cheetos.
Yeah, Cheetos are okay. It's okay.
But I mean, it sucks that that's the choice because there's just, it really, in order to stay relevant and really know what's going on and be on top of everything so that, you can, it takes too much. It takes your entire
Yeah,
life.
that's a good point, and I think that's been. I think recently that I mean I've been realizing that more and more, and I feel like I'm going through a minor quarter life crisis of now that I'm out of college, and it's like, yeah, do I want to, especially as like in the games industry, do I want to stay relevant and play the games that I want to play and do these experiences that are so cool, or do I want to be trying to make the next good experience? And it's really hard to manage both because games take forever to make.
Yeah.
And playing games now, it's like, yeah, I would love to play Cyberpunk, but do I have 40 hours in my life? Fuck no.
And I think that could be solved with what you're talking about. I think your idea is actually really sound, because if it was bite size, if it was smaller, I think that more people would be able to incorporate it into their lives.
Yeah,
But
and I
I
mean,
just,
yeah, like you said, every game, if they wanted to do that, would have to be designed with that in mind, and some experiences could be deteriorated from that. But I'm wondering if there's just, I mean, self-discipline at the end of the day is the answer, but I wonder if there's like some way to develop something where like, you can set up goals of just like, yeah, I'm gonna play this game. Like, it's nice with a show, WandaVision. It's like every day it comes, or every Friday it comes out at a certain time. It's an hour, and then that's it. So like, it's a very clear commitment in the brain.
yeah.
Gaming is very hard to get to that point. I wish there was a way to be very clear and committing to playing a game.
Well, I also think that they need to be a little bit more, just games in general need to be a little bit more cognizant of like because I think there's a point when you're playing the game, definitely in the beginning, you're super excited about the game, you're like going into it, you have all this energy, and you can play it up to a certain point and retain that energy, but there's always a point in the game where you've had enough.
Yep.
And I think that, and it's so funny because the Call of Duty campaigns, I love them because they're so short. And I feel like I never, like, it's all the good side of the feeling of playing games and none of okay, I get it. I've played this. And
Absolutely.
it's like you can't eat cake every freaking day. If you like, if there was
Exactly.
a chocolate cake maker and you made a cake as big as, Seattle, because we live there. It's not like that cake, you couldn't eat the whole thing and the last bite's going to taste as good as the first bite.
Exactly.
And like, why can't we think that way? Why aren't we thinking this way with games? Like, why aren't we designing them for the average person? And I've said this before, but I think the problem is there's so many gamers out there that are skewing the data because they're achievement hunters. They're not doing it because they like it. They're doing it because they want to finish the task. They want to get it done. They want to have the points on their Xbox score. They want to do this, that, and that. And it skews the data for the developers because they're like, oh, well, if we put more little trinkets that they need to find, they're happy because it gives them more to do, more collectibles. Let's just add more collectibles. It's
Yeah,
like,
and I
no.
think the other side of it is the whole money thing of like, so many people complain when a game is $60, but it's not enough of a game to
Yeah.
merit 60. And it's just like, so a lot of these developers have like, oh, we have to have like a certain amount of hours of gameplay, and the only way to do that is to put in filler content and put these side missions in, and it's just like, and that's not the only way to do it. Or make a game like The Last of Us that's this super long story. And again, it was cool, but I feel like I really wish we could get to a point as an industry of like, it's okay to charge a certain amount for something that's smaller and more condensed.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it should. I mean, as I said, I think that games like The Last of Us should cost like $120.
Yeah. Like,
Well,
fuck.
even if it was shorter, and not even the length, just the quality. I mean, it really should be. It's the only industry that I mean, obviously, other media seems to be the only side of things that doesn't adhere to supply and demand.
Yeah.
Because to be honestly, they if they put the next Zelda at $300, people buy it.
Yeah. Someone, yeah, there'd be a
Not
group, not as
someone,
many,
dude.
but
I don't know. I mean, there'd be an outrage, but you want to play Zelda. People want to play these games. It's like the demand is there. It's not going away.
yeah, and it is also just a lot of, how do you value your money and time? Because yeah, for us, like a new Zelda game, if it was $100, a little more reasonable than 300. But like
Yeah.
if it was $100, like you and I are like, ah, fuck, expensive. But I know what happened. I know how it took to make that game, and that's worth $100 to me. But to other people, it's like that's not fucking worth $100. But it's just it goes
I
back
guess.
to not everyone knows what it takes to make the game, and
Well, there's also
games
the
are expensive.
pirating. I know we're getting to the end, but there's also the pirating aspect of it that like, and I think that that's the other side of things is,
Yeah.
once you start to make it unaccessible to certain people or make it cost too much, then the Robin Hoods of the world will come out and they'll, they'll make it free.
Yep,
So it's you just
definitely.
so maybe there's that, and I don't know. And of course, you definitely want everybody to be able to enjoy the game. Um, and yeah, so I mean, $60 is good. It's a good spot. I just wish they weren't as long.
Yeah.
But maybe we're the only two on the planet.
Yeah,
I don't
we're
know.
just tired gamers.
Last of Us killed me, man.
It did. Oh God, I for like you mentioned it. I literally my brain was like, yeah, we're dead from that. I
Yeah, I feel like
forgot.
that's like it was an education. Like I went to school
Yeah,
for.
it's a whole semester of fucking gaming.
All right. Well, that's
Yeah.
the show. That's what we think, and we like that you listen. So keep